Welcome back to Calm Coding, your weekly exploration of the latest cybersecurity news and stories. If you're here to cut through the noise and get a really thorough, targeted understanding of the week's biggest threats, you're absolutely in the right place.
We've assembled a pretty critical stack of source material for this one. The mission today really is to connect the dots between, massive passive data exposure and the highly targeted attacks that always seem to follow.
Right.
We're looking at a huge corporate intelligence leak, two different and, frankly, sophisticated phishing campaigns, and even a major policy shift driven by this exact kind of data fear.
I think the key theme here is trust exploitation. It seems to be all about that. We start with just the shocking carelessness of a 16-terabyte leak, a professional intelligence goldmine, and then we move straight into how hackers are weaponizing legitimate security features.
And physical network gaps.
Yep.
Exactly. What we've learned this week is that if a piece of technology is designed to earn your trust, it will inevitably become a target for abuse.
Okay, let's just unpack this with some of the figures because they're jaw-dropping. 16 terabytes of exposed data.
Yeah.
Discovered by cybersecurity researchers just sitting on an unprotected database instance.
Right.
To put that in perspective, that's hundreds of millions of professional profiles. This wasn't a hack. This was just a failure of basic configuration.
It was a configuration failure, pure and simple. And it speaks volumes about the culture of massive data aggregation, especially in the lead generation industry. The database contained almost 4.3 billion documents. Researchers rightly called it, and I'm quoting here, one of the largest lead generation datasets to have ever leaked.
And it was a MongoDB instance.
A MongoDB instance that, by all accounts, was simply left open, wide open to the public internet, missing any essential authentication.
When you look at the structure of the data, I mean, it points directly to an intelligence gathering operation, right? It was split into 9 collections with labels like
intent, profiles, people, companies.
Exactly.
And that structure is precisely why this leak is so high risk for an individual. This wasn't random chatter from the internet. It was compiled B2B intelligence. At least 3 of those collections contain nearly 2 billion files of highly granular, personally identifiable information.
So we're not just talking about an email address and maybe a password hash here.
No, not at all.
This data set provided a whole profile. It's like the professional narrative of the user.
That's a critical point. The exposed details included names, emails, phone numbers, location data, and crucially deep professional context.
Like what?
LinkedIn URLs, position titles, employers, their full employment history, degrees, certifications, even people's photographs.
Wow. And the researchers think this was all scraped.
They believe it was scraped directly from sites like LinkedIn and also, AI sales platforms like Apollo.io.
So let's connect this for the listener. If your profile was in that pile, why should you be particularly worried about this specific combination of data? I mean, what kind of fraud does this enable that a typical breach doesn't?
It enables what we call hyper-personalized attacks. A common data breach, it gives a criminal a key to your house.
Okay.
This leak. This gives them the blueprints, the deed, and a detailed family history. They can bypass typical security questions because they know your exact employment history.
Yeah, they sound completely legitimate.
Completely. They can commit deepfake fraud using your photo and position title to convince your colleagues or your customers. Identity theft shifts from those generic phishing emails we all see to high-stakes spear phishing that's tailored specifically to you.
That's a grim analysis. And the database was locked down, right?
It was 2 days after researchers alerted the suspected company. But, and this is the big but, we still have no idea for how long that 16 terabytes was publicly exposed.
Or who grabbed a copy.
Exactly. So that intelligence is now almost certainly flowing into the criminal ecosystem, fueling the next wave of attacks. And that really is the perfect segue. The existence of these massive data pools, it completely transforms the landscape for active attacks. Criminals now have the context to bypass some really sophisticated enterprise defenses.
And we saw a textbook example of that recently, an attack where the criminals didn't try to break the security system. They used it as camouflage. We're talking about the Mimecast feature abuse.
Exactly. Mimecast is a major enterprise email security solution, and one of its core features is URL rewriting. or link wrapping.
Right, I've seen that.
The service reroutes all external links through a trusted Mimecast domain for scanning before you, the user, see the final destination.
And the attackers found a way to use that trust signal against the system itself. How did that mechanism fail?
Well, the mechanism didn't technically fail. The trust failed. Attackers sent a malicious link, Mimecast wrapped it, and that turned the dangerous link into a trusted one that starts with mimecast.com. So the email filter sees this trusted, verified domain signature in the email body, and it just lets the message pass through. It's an algorithmic failure, really. The system prioritizes the signature of the wrapper over the payload.
But hold on. If researchers saw more than 40,000 emails hit over 6,000 organizations in just 2 weeks, wasn't Mimecast supposed to be analyzing that traffic in real time? Shouldn't it have caught on after the first few hundred attempts?
That's the essential challenge. The initial analysis must have either been too slow or maybe too reliant on signature detection. The attackers were extremely quick to rotate the final malicious destination.
I see.
So while the Mimecast wrapper stayed constant, that trusted element, the ultimate landing page, kept changing. This allowed the attack to sustain a massive scale. It hit consulting, technology, and real estate the hardest.
And most of them were in the U.S., I read.
The majority, yeah. About 34,000 of the victim emails were in the U.S.
So the lesson here is that relying on any single layer of trust, even from a top security vendor, is inherently risky.
Precisely. It turns a core defense mechanism into a stealth cloak. Now, if that's the state of email security, where do criminals go when they want speed and guaranteed delivery?
They go mobile.
They go mobile.
Let's pivot to smishing. SMS-based phishing. We've known about this for years, but reports suggest it's evolving. It's not just a consumer nuisance anymore. It's a major enterprise threat.
Absolutely. The sophistication has ramped up because the rewards are so much higher. Smishing today is mainly about targeting employees for network credentials, not just tricking consumers into premium phone charges. In fact, reports show SMS is now the second most common extortion method globally. It contributed to over $442 billion stolen by scammers in the past year.
And there's this physical technology making it truly frightening. The SMS Blaster. When I first heard that name, I thought it was a prop from a spy movie, but this is real hardware, isn't it?
It is entirely real and alarmingly accessible. Think of it as a pirate cell tower, a portable, inexpensive fake phone mast.
You can just buy one.
You can buy the hardware on the dark web for the price of a decent laptop, fit it into a backpack, and say, drive past a business park.
So it's a localized broadcast system, and it completely bypasses the telecom network.
That's its deadly efficiency. These devices broadcast thousands of SMS messages in seconds within a local radius. Crucially, because the messages are transmitted locally right over the radio frequency layer, they completely bypass any legitimate network-level protections a major telecom provider has in place.
Wow. Your phone just sees a strong local signal and accepts the text.
It just connects. And the major risk, as you noted, is that we still rely so heavily on SMS for things like one-time passwords and two-factor authentication.
So what's the industry doing? How do you fight back against a physical device that just ignores the digital network?
It demands a really fundamental shift away from SMS for identity validation. On the technical side, we are seeing the adoption of RCS, rich communication services, which brings in encryption. That's a big improvement. But the major policy shift is the move toward API-based authentication, something championed by the GSMA's Open Gateway initiative.
For our listeners, why is API authentication so much better than using SMS for 2FA?
It completely eliminates the vulnerable transport layer. SMS is clear text, it can be intercepted or in this case subverted by a rogue tower. The Open Gateway initiative provides standardized APIs like a SIM swap API or a number verification API that let an enterprise, like your bank, send a real-time query directly to the telecom provider's back-end database.
So instead of sending you a password and a text, the bank just asks the network, is the SIM for this number active, and has it been swapped recently?
Exactly that. The identity validation happens server to server. It's verification through secure data exchange, not insecure data transport.
Technology can help, but you can't fix bad habits with good code. What about the human element in all this?
Cyber hygiene is, as always, the ultimate defense. Employees just have to understand that this level of sophistication means blind trust is fatal. You have to operate on the assumption that any link in a text message is suspicious.
Always.
Legitimate organizations rarely, if ever, send urgent, unsolicited SMS requests for your credentials. If you get one, the rule is simple. Open the official app or website directly. Never, ever click the link in the text.
So when you have an environment with massive intelligence leaks fueling this kind of sophisticated fraud, eventually governments have to step in.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the geopolitical policy reaction we saw recently in Asia.
That's the final piece of the puzzle. The most significant response came from Taiwan, which announced a block on the popular Chinese social media and e-commerce platform Red Note, or Shohangshu.
Right.
And this came into effect in early December, affecting millions of local users.
That's a huge measure to take. What was the specific evidence that drove that policy decision?
There were two major concerns, and they're both directly related to what we've been discussing. First, just massive fraud linked directly to the platform. Officials tied Red Note to over 1,700 cases of fraud in 2024 alone. That resulted in reported losses of more than $7.9 million. So it was a major vector for financial crime.
And the second part, which connects right back to that 16-terabyte leak, was the aggressive data harvesting.
That's the nexus point. Taiwan's Ministry of Digital Affairs raised red flags in 15 different categories of data harvesting. The most concerning element was the app's background collection of sensitive user data, device IDs, precise location data, contact lists, and, maybe most invasively, the contents of the user's clipboard.
The clipboard, even when the app isn't active.
Even when the application was not actively being used on screen.
Wow. Clipboard data crosses a line. It's not just basic data gathering, it's highly invasive, real-time surveillance of whatever you're copying. Passwords, account numbers.
Private text messages, anything. And this is exactly the kind of granular intelligence that fuels the lead generation scraping we talked about at the start.
Right.
The government was reacting to a perceived national security threat and a fraud epidemic, realizing that these massive scraping operations create an existential risk.
But the ban was controversial, wasn't it? I remember seeing opposition parties labeling it as censorship. They were pointing out that many other global platforms, including those owned by Meta, engage in similar aggressive data collection.
It really illustrates the paradox of modern digital life. The immediate quantifiable consequence was that the ban triggered a massive surge in downloads for VPN services.
Of course.
Users prioritized access to a platform they valued, even with warnings about fraud and security. They immediately sought out a technical way to bypass the state's attempt to enforce security.
It perfectly captures that tension between national security, fraud prevention, and just the fierce individual determination to maintain access to a platform that, for many people, has become part of their culture. So we've had a really comprehensive discussion today. We established the foundation of the modern threat ecosystem, this huge corporate PII risk from unsecured databases leaking terabytes of intelligence.
16 terabytes.
16 terabytes. We saw that intelligence immediately get weaponized using sophistication like the Mimecast feature abuse and the physical threat of the SMS Blaster, and finally, that resulting global tension over data control, really demonstrated by Taiwan's policy moves.
The synthesis is unavoidable, I think. The threat is highly blended. You just cannot separate database security from phishing defense anymore. Defense now requires a layered approach that acknowledges the flaws in these foundational technologies like SMS.
Right.
It's driving the adoption of better identity verification methods like those open gateway APIs. But most importantly, that tech has to be paired with employee awareness because the threat is so often just leveraging trust.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. If governments are blocking apps due to fears of data harvesting and fraud, and the public responds by using VPNs to evade those blocks, where does the ultimate responsibility for data security and cyber hygiene truly lie? Is it with the state, the provider who designs the trusted features, or with you, the individual user who has to decide which risks to accept? Thank you for joining us for this discussion. We look forward to exploring the next batch of reports with you next week on Calm Coding.